we have a presentation by Carly Burson and Bridget Wulle from Hanover College on the relationship between elevation perspective and attitude.
So we want to start off talking about perspectives. So everyone has a different perspective, whether that's about the world, life, religion, and those are all abstract versions of perspective. And we wanted to take that into a little bit more of a concrete version of perspective. So we're going to start off by looking at visual perspective, and we did some film research. Looking at the film research, we looked at when you look at characters from below, it can give them the appearance of confidence or a bully, making others feel inferior. So if you imagine looking at someone like Shaq and how that would make you feel looking at them, you might feel a little bit inferior to him. And then looking at characters from above can make them appear harmless or subordinate, making others feel more confident. So if you imagine looking at someone smaller than you or at a small child, you might feel a little bit more powerful in that situation. So based off the film research, we decided to take that into a more natural state, and we wanted to look at a visual perspective there with that. There hasn't been many studies done, but we did discover some background research, and this previous research was done in 2019, so it's really new and relevant. There was background lab research done in a computer lab with a gambling and risk-taking game. So the participants were asked to gamble and take risks as they would normally, but the pictures in the background on the computer screen were of different elevations. And in the study described, there was high elevation and low elevation backgrounds, and the low elevation backgrounds were actually in eye level, so what we would see on an everyday basis. So this research was taken out into the field, and they went to a gas station and put posters behind the counter where people were buying lottery tickets. And on the first and fourth day, there was an eye level perspective poster. And then on the second and third day, there was high elevation perspective posters, and they measured the amount of money spent on lottery tickets on those days. So it resulted in the higher elevation poster. When that was used, customers did spend more on lottery tickets than when the low elevation poster was displayed. So the behavior of buying lottery tickets here seems to imply that the consumers were feeling a little bit more lucky, or you could even say more optimistic when the high elevation was posted. So this takes us into what we decided to match with visual perspective, and that is optimism. So the definition of optimism is a positive frame of mind and the tendency to expect the best or potentially favorable outcome. So we believe there's 3 dimensions of optimism, and that's confidence, feeling of being in control, and willingness to take risks. Confidence is a dimension of optimism because if you're more confident about an outcome, then you're going to be more optimistic about it. If you feel in control of an outcome, you're going to be more optimistic about it. And the same could be said for risk. If you're willing to take a risk on an outcome, you're more likely to be optimistic about it. So as for influences on optimism, optimism is very multidimensional. So if you think about how you feel when you receive a positive feedback or anything like that, and that feeling you get from that verbal positive influence, then you go beyond that and we think about the visual perspective and how that can influence your optimism. So it's not just a feeling, it's things that you see causing you to have those feelings and then potentially feel that optimism. So our hypothesis is because high elevation has been shown to elicit a higher sense of consumer confidence based off of past research, we believe that it will impact people's attitudes. Specifically, we believe that individuals exposed to high elevation perspectives will be more optimistic, more confident, have a greater sense of control, and take more risks when compared to individuals exposed to low elevation and normal elevation perspectives.
Okay, so for our study, we had 166 participants. We obtained those participants mostly through our personal social media outlets, Facebook and Twitter. We posted those links on there. And then we also post our study on psychology research on the web. So first, when participants would go to our study, they were gone to informed consent, which just stated that we were measuring optimism. And then when they clicked on that they consented, they were randomly placed into one of the 3 conditions, which the difference was the background picture that they would see. So they would either see a high elevation picture, a normal elevation, which was just eye level, or a low elevation picture. So this would be an example of what your screen would look like if you were in the normal elevation condition. There was 5 different pictures that would rotate through with each question, and the questions would just be shown up at the top like that. And then the same thing for a high elevation, you'd have pictures that rotated through with each question that you answered. And then also for low elevation, so another example of just what that would look like with the questions on there. And then for our questionnaire, we tried to take questions from previously tested studies, and most of those were trait questions, so like how the person feels all the time, and we tried to change those into more state questions, which how they were feeling like at that specific time they were taking the study. And our questionnaire was on a 7-point Likert scale from 0 to 6, and 0 was strongly agree and 6 was strongly disagree. So here's some examples of our questions. We had about 5 questions for each different variable, but we had to eliminate some in order to get our Chromax alphas more reliable. So as you can see, we had a fairly good Chromax alpha for most of our questions.
So for our analysis and results, we did a one-way ANOVA, but we did a one-way ANOVA for each category. So we did one for risk-taking, optimism, confidence, and control. And as you can see here, we only had one significant result, and that was risk-taking with a p-value of 0.049. So looking deeper into our significant result, risk-taking had a low elevation mean of 2.30 and a high elevation mean of 3.04. So as Bridget mentioned, we were on a Likert scale from 0 to 6, so a lower mean would have supported our hypothesis. So in this case, the means were backwards than from what we had expected, but we did still achieve significant results. And then here's a graph where you can see the difference between the low, normal, and high elevations. And again, it just shows the low elevation had a lower mean, which was opposite our hypothesis.
So like Carly just said, our hypothesis was not supported. It was actually the opposite of what we had thought. So we had expected that the participants in the low elevation conditions would report lower levels of agreeableness than across the other conditions, but we actually had the opposite. So the individuals in the low level elevation were significantly more likely to choose more risky decisions than the normal high elevation condition. And this was also opposite of what the previous research we had found showed. So in the Jamie research from 2019, he also showed that high elevation led people to make more riskier decisions. But in his condition, he had a high elevation and a normal elevation, or what we call normal elevation, so there was no low elevation. So what we kind of thought maybe the reason for that is the low elevation condition, looking up at the sky might have made people think that they would be more likely to skydive as opposed to looking directly at the ground. And then from the other study that we had, the film research, their research was done mostly with like characters in a film looking down at people or people looking up at people. And ours was more with elements of nature, and you just have a bigger view of everything. There's no boundaries when you're looking at it from this perspective. So it's just kind of a different perspective. For limitations, future research. So we didn't actually ask any demographics questions, which we think it could be interesting to ask some of those and just see the difference in the way things such as different genders would answer our questions. Also, we noticed when we were taking our study, the questions were, as you could see, kind of small on the pictures. So at times people might have tried to like zoom in on the pictures, which would kind of mess up the effect of the whole background in general because you weren't really getting the picture. And we had some participants tell us that like when you took it on your phone, the picture was smaller. So it would need to be taken in like a more controlled setting where people had to take it on laptops or desk computers. For implications in the real world, so we think it could be used to help make marketing decisions or like help how advertisements are made. And the one example of that we thought of was like with car commercials. And you know, car commercials are always like really weird type of just driving around random things and stuff. We thought if it was like from the bottom of a mountain, like looking up, it could change the perspective of if people want to buy the car. Also with the film studies, it could make, if a character was making a risky decision and having that perspective, it could give a parallel to the person watching the movie and make them feel like they would also make that same decision.
Any questions?
Not so much a question as an observation. You were talking about the difference, why your results might be different because of not using people. It's possible we relate to people differently than we do natural things. In other words, if I've got a really big person, that's going to feel different than a really big building. I'm used to buildings being bigger to me. And not everybody towers over me like Shaq. And so there may be a little bit of a difference in that. Could have been part of what was going on there.
Right.
Students have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Do y'all think if you use like something else that would intimidate a person, like maybe, I don't know, like a spider or something that induces anxiety, that you would get different, like more significant results?
I think our results would be very different. Most of the pictures weren't necessarily things that would like outright scare people. I don't know which way that would go though. If people would be more likely to answer, they would feel more risky if they had a spider in front of them or less. But I think it would definitely be different.
We also
If you were
talked
looking
about-
up at a spider, you would be intimidated. I would hypothesize.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I have a question. Did you guys change the pictures that you were using?
Yes. Well, I think that I know before, whenever we did this in class, we had different pictures. Now it's not loading. But
That's what I thought.
we went through our survey and put actual screenshots from the survey on here. So I don't think we necessarily changed our pictures. It just happened to be different ones because we tried to match the question with the elevation. That way we could put it on here and give you guys a real view of what participants were seeing.
I know
We're 5 of each type, though, if that's what you're asking. Annie.
Yes.
But those just rotated throughout. But from the first time we did it, I think we might have changed a couple just because we had a significant amount of trouble getting the pictures to the right size and the right perspectives for what we wanted to do with them. So I think we might have changed a couple of them.
I wonder if you, because I know that you said that the text on the picture was a little hard to see. Did you ever try moving it below the picture or like above? I guess below would probably, because you could see the picture and the question at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
We started off with something like that, but since previous research had the picture as the entire background, we thought that it would have more of an influence, of more like a subconscious influence, if it was the background instead of just a random picture and then the question elsewhere on the page.
Yeah.
We also kind of wanted to try and make it as like least obvious as possible of what we were studying while they were taking it. So we kind of thought if it was just the background, it might just seem like we were just messing around with the backgrounds of the pictures, just like to make our study look nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Do you have the ANOVA statistics for risk taking? And you said the other comparisons were not significant, right?
Yes.